The UFC didn't think so, of course. Literally, the performance of the night bonuses. No bonus awarded for fight of the night, curiously. I don't...
Not even Fakrutino of Dolby.
Yeah, I know. Like that
ended
seems like
in exactly the kind of thing that they love.
Or even like Hawkprost Gordon for just a straight up brawl. That would have been fight of the night material as well. But literally all 4 of the performance of the night bonuses are just awarded to the 4 finishes.
Mm-hmm.
So like, yeah, Fakrutino of Dolby, Gaffarov Kong, and Hawkprost and Gordon, they fought their fucking asses off, but because they ended in a decision, no extra money.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a bummer. In as much as the whole bonus system isn't already a bummer, but I wouldn't hate the bonuses if it was on top of like a reasonable pay, you know? Then a little extra incentive to make something crazy happen. Sure, I get that. It's the fact that people are out there begging for it every card. Please.
Yep.
Mr. White.
Please, sir. May I have just a crumb of one of your hundreds of millions?
Yeah, maybe you have a whole fight, a really good fight, and then you sort of tuck your legs underneath your coat so they can't be seen, and you scoot around on a little skateboard dolly thing. Mm. Please, Mr. White. 50 G's, baby, please.
I love the way they made that. That's become a sort of badass call. Like begging for money has now become sort of a badass call out.
Oh yeah. Nothing more badass than having the patronage of a wealthy patrician. Hello, and welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I'm your host, Connor. That's my co-host, Phil.
Hello.
And we're talking about UFC 303 today. We may also get to a little of last weekend's UFC card, which was main evented by Robert Whittaker and Ikram Aliskerov. All of our, fatalistic fretting about Robert Whittaker proved completely baseless, which was nice. And but UFC 303 is really the main thing up on the docket. Whatever we can't get to, we're going to try to do a bonus episode, so never fear. We're going to talk about because I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff last week, Phil. I actually thought a very solid card to watch live.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the most exciting.
Yeah.
It wasn't the most, exciting card. I think it was definitely saved by the main event. Let's say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because a sadder or more grimmer, outcome in the main event might have left it feeling like a slog. But, as it was, you could look back on it and be like, interesting.
Yeah, and some of the grindy fights were, disgusting in a way that I found strangely compelling. So maybe that's just a fetish of mine, but I actually quite liked several of the decisions on this card. But UFC 303 is going to be our main focus for this week's episode, and this one just has been an absolute shit show. Was supposed to be Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. Everybody knows the story by now. Conor McGregor got injured, and so that fight has had to be postponed again. Don't feel bad for Michael Chandler, though. Phil, I thought I sensed you taking pity on Michael Chandler over there.
No, I mean, it's still funny.
Okay, good, because don't. He really has been clear about that. Do not feel bad for him. I'm glad.
It's not his fault.
Yeah, he'll be glad to know that. Now we have the main event of Alex Pereira, light heavyweight champ, of course, defending again against Garry-Prochazka. Or was their last fight Pereira won the title from Prochazka?
It was vacant, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. Who can keep track of the light heavyweight title these days?
Yeah, it was because it was Hill won it from... Hill won it from Prochazka.
Teixeira.
Prochazka won it from Teixeira,
Yeah.
then had to vacate. Then Hill also won it from Teixeira, and then had to vacate. And then they had just the vacant belt between Prochazka and Pereira.
Okay. So anyway,
potentially with Big Yarn and Magomedov in there somewhere as well.
Yeah, something. So we're getting a rematch of a fight that I don't know how much new there is to say about it, but it was at least, it's like last week's main event. I think this is probably the best of a bad situation. Maybe they shouldn't have hung an entire card on Conor McGregor's quaking shoulders, but hey, you live and you learn. So we're getting this as our main event now. At the very least, these are two of the sport's most exciting fighters. You can't complain about that, and it is for a title. The rest of this card has also been ravaged by pullouts and replacements, though. One in particular, because right here, smack bang in the middle of the main card, a fight I do not want to discuss, we now have Anthony Smith versus Roman Dolidze, who I guess is a light heavyweight now. That'll fix his problems. Did you see what happened with this fight? This was supposed to be Jamal Hill and Khalil Roundtree.
Okay.
And Roundtree had a tainted supplement, which he was cleared as having taken a tainted supplement, but, was suspended 2 months after confirming that because he did have some kind of steroid in his system. He was replaced by Carlos Ulberg. Cool. Ulberg Hill. I'll watch that. And then Hill pulled out because he had some horrific injury and was replaced by Anthony Smith. And then subsequently, for unknown reasons, according to Wikipedia, Ulberg pulled out and was replaced by Roman Dolidze. So this is like a 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon type situation with this one fight. A lot of other fights on this card have had a similar, although usually less convoluted process happen to them. And the result is that we have, I think, 3 fights that I really want to talk about from this pay-per-view card, with a couple of runner-ups. And those fights are Alex Pereira, Garry-Prochazka, 2, of course. The co-main event, Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopes. That's just a fire matchup. Sounds like fun. And opening the main card, Ian Machado Gary is taking on Michael Venom Page. So that's kind of what we're left with. It's not bad.
No, I mean, I think it's definitely one which I think people will be going home happy from. Because there are potentials for stinkers in the card, most notably, obviously, in that opener for the main card. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about it a bit later, but Machado Gary against Michael Page is not necessarily guaranteed to be fireworks. But I don't think you can go wrong with closing out with Ortega-Lopes and Pereira-Prochazka. I don't think...
Fireworks.
I guess it is possible in at least one way, but not particularly. I don't think it's possible for those people to really have boring fights.
Yeah, barring a strange injury. I mean, that's the way those fights could be unsatisfying. Otherwise, I think you're seeing some fireworks on the ground, on the feet, everywhere. Yeah, and there's a couple other things. Maybe when we do our bonus talk about some of the Whitaker-Alaskarov undercard, we could perhaps touch on fights like Cub Swanson, Andre Fili, and Charles Jourdain versus Jean Silva. Those are both cool. Just sort of. Oh, and Peyton Talbot is returning on this card. I still shudder just to say his extremely Zoomer-ass name, but he is clearly...
What is it again?
Peyton Talbot.
Oh, I thought he had he had a really Zoomer-esque nickname, but yes, that is an nickname.
No, just the name. That he looks and sounds like a Disney Channel actor, but is a really fucking good prospect. So he is also fighting on these televised prelims, if that even is still a thing. So anyway, all that ado aside, let's talk about the main event, about which, again, I don't think there's a whole lot new to say. We've seen this fight. It wasn't even that long ago. And I don't think we can really say that either guy has changed in any noticeable way since. So what do you make of Pereira-Prochazka 2?
So it's like the Hill versus Pereira fight. It feels like one where, from like a technical standpoint, you just have to pick Alex Pereira.
Yep.
For reasons that we saw against both Hill and Prochazka. But yeah, as I said in the Hill matchup, Prochazka is inherently a much more threatening style matchup for Pereira than Hill was, because Hill was going to give Pereira exactly the kind of fight that he wanted. Namely, he was going to be coming after him like slow-footed, janky technique, and was just going to be like, slowly pacing into Pereira's kill zone, which, as we've seen with him as well as Sean Strickland, there's reasons why, like, I'm a janky innovator who's also just going to walk slowly into this absolute minefield. Has not worked at all. Prochazka, obviously, also a janky innovator, but he's a janky innovator who, like, lunges in from really far away.
Maybe Hill's
very quickly.
Maybe Hill's footwork is like walking into a minefield. He's sort of doing like the sand walk from Dune. That's like, like a deliberately
just like shuffling and sweeping his legs around to make sure that, like, at no point is a giant worm going to burst out through the cage and eat him.
I mean, this is happening in Nevada. So, if not there, then where? Would you have to be worried about a sandworm picking up your rhythmic footsteps? But anyway, yes, Yuri Prochazka, much more to the point with his craziness and weirdness.
Yeah. And just covers distance much faster. Like, you can't really call him a long fighter in the sense that he's establishing with his jab or, controlling people from range. But he, does lunge in like a big giant fencer to cover distance and throws like big shots, and Pereira backs away in straight lines and often has his head straight up in the air.
Yep.
And so, there's every reason to assume that will still work at times. And it might just, knock Pereira out. He's not the most indestructible fighter in the world. So there's just like the last time, there's reasons to assume that it's going to be competitive and fun. But obviously the reasons why we picked Pereira were also that, eventually he's probably going to start figuring Prochazka out. There's a reason why people don't fight like Garry-Page. And that he's just going to absolutely tear his legs to pieces.
Well, we did learn, fortunately, since that fight, that Prochazka has learned his lesson about the leg kicks.
Yeah.
The lesson being that they make him strong.
Yes.
Iron sharpens iron. Of course, literally his next fight after getting KO'd by Pereira was that fight at UFC 300 against Alexander Rakic, who just absolutely shredded Prochazka's legs with, like, no setup low kicks. Just at will landed them. So that's been addressed by being ignored.
Yeah, if there's one thing you can expect from Yuri Prochazka, it is pretty much no technical development whatsoever, unfortunately. I mean, maybe he's just playing the long game. Maybe he just knew he was going to win against Rakic, so he's actually gotten really good at checking low kicks.
Yeah.
And he just decided he wasn't going to, because he was going to hide it from when he gets to fight Pereira next.
I mean, if any UFC fighter has read cover to cover The Art of War,
yeah,
that is very, very much.
I feel like he would be listening to the audiobook.
While posing in a frozen wood.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right outside.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah, he didn't want to reveal his cards. No, but that's what I mean about this fight. Like, we saw it not that long ago. It was one fight ago for each of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have had it like very clearly demonstrated that basically nothing has changed about either of these fighters in the meantime.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, something might have changed for Pereira. He's, as we've said many times, done an amazing job of sort of adapting himself from MMA and being a consistent fighter in the sport and so on. But yeah, I mean, he knocked Jamal Hill out pretty much instantaneously.
Yeah. What would you like?
The one who had to make the adaptations.
Right. What would you like to see change about Pereira? I mean, it is often the tougher task, being the guy who won, to know what to fix. But I think there are pretty clearly some things in that Prochazka fight that could be fixed. What if he did come out with some technical improvement or some strategic improvement? What would you like to see?
I mean, I think he just needs to be on the front foot more, right?
That would help.
I mean, this was a shockingly passive fight. Not shockingly, but, you know, he was clearly very concerned about the potential power of Prochazka, and not without reason. But, you know, Prochazka is a bit like Johnny Walker in that if you give him just open space to run his ideas on you, he will actually start hurting you because he's enormous and powerful, and he's not...
And fearless.
He is quite creative. Yeah. But, you know, if you just put him on the back foot, he's sort of hopeless.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Pereira did fight a somewhat, as he did against Hill, fought quite a back foot performance against Prochazka. So, yeah, I think he just needs to move forward and work off his jab and so on. Because I don't think that... I mean, Rakic showed this, right?
Yeah.
He just threw in combinations and stayed on top of... well, not necessarily stayed on top. He also sort of had a bit of a back foot performance, but it was a much higher pace one than... much higher paced approach than Pereira. So, and yeah, mostly sort of chewed Jiri up. I think the main issue that people have with doing that against Jiri and the success they have, whether it's, you know, Oezdemir or Rakic or whatever, is simply that they can't maintain that pace and they can't just continue to keep hurting him, and eventually they get sucked into a Prochazka fight. But do I think that Alex Pereira would do that? I don't really. I don't think there's anything in his career to suggest that he would start to fade out of the fight in the same way that, like, noted people who fade out of fights, Volkan Oezdemir and Alexander Rakic.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it's... I suppose to the brain of an MMA fighter, it's counterintuitive, but actually, like, going after the guy is a great way to control the pace. Rather than, like, the safe move feels like it should be, oh, this guy's crazy and aggressive, I have to, like, outmaneuver him. I have to be the matador. And, like, you know, when, like, a bullfighter, when a matador fights a bull... It's like in a highly controlled environment with like a dozen other people there to like jump in if something goes wrong. Like, they do it because it's risky, you know, like it's if you had the capacity to corner the bull and to overpower it and to make it so it was too worried to charge you, then you would do that if you actually had to fight a bull. Also, Yuri Prochazka is not a bull. He's a guy. He can be knocked out. Mm-hmm. He can be hurt. It's so common in this sport, and in others too. I mean, I just published a piece about Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin over on my Substack, facepunching.substack.com, and you know, that was another one where like the less experienced fighter came in and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to deal with this pressure by like running away faster than he can get to me," and it was unsustainable. He just couldn't keep it up because, of course, you can't. Sometimes you have to be able to like stand your ground and back the other guy off. But even if Pereira is going to fight exactly as he has been directionally, and that's a trend that goes way back to like even the Adesanya fights. His MMA career in general, Sean Strickland, he has been very pretty comfortable on the back foot in a way that he really wasn't as a kickboxer. But if he's going to do that, I'd still like to see that jab. And I'd still like to see some movement built around that jab. The problem he had with Prochazka, and the problems he's had with a couple other people in this style, is that he is, as you said, literally being passive. When they move forward, he moves back. And often not in a way that even keeps like a threat online. Like a lot of times the threat happens when his ass is against the fence already. I just like to... I don't think it really should actually be that hard to outmaneuver Yuri Prochazka if that's your aim. But you gotta stick a quick, decisive shot in his face, and you gotta be able to cut an angle. And those two things go hand in hand. You know, good luck pivoting if you don't have a jab. Good luck jabbing successfully if you can't pivot. That's what I would like to see more than anything from Pereira. I'm cool with him being he's massive and accurate and has great timing and huge power. I'm cool with him being a more laid back, you come to me kind of fighter. And of course he's got the low kicks. He really has like a souped up version of the old Machida game. Or like if you didn't crash into one of Machida's counters, he would just kick you to pieces. That works. Mm-hmm. But when a guy like Prochazka, who eventually reaches his limit break and just starts charging you, you need to be able to kind of fence him out. And that's the thing that I don't really see from Pereira, even though I know he must be capable of it. Pereira has such a good jab. It is a crushing, quick, effortless-looking jab. And he throws it like 4 times a fight. Mm-hmm. I don't know why. It just doesn't occur to him to throw it. He just doesn't use it like positionally to actually control the fight. So I still, as it was in the first fight, I agree. Like there's a perfectly decent chance that Prochazka hurts him. Gets to him and hurts him, because it kind of happened the first time around. He wasn't that badly hurt, but he just kind of...
I will say...
He invites it.
Yeah. I will say, on rewatch, it is actually a more competitive fight than I remember it being.
Oh, yeah.
Because my general memories are that... Pereira starts chewing him up, and then Prochazka hurts him, and then Pereira goes back to chewing him up and then knocks him out. It wasn't really quite like that. I forgot the long and admittedly mostly pretty empty period of top control that Prochazka got. Mm-hmm. Once again, proving that Pereira is still not actually a good wrestler at all.
No, he's not.
But that it just doesn't matter because he's just fighting pure strikers over and over and over again. I'd forgotten that, and I'd forgotten the round where Yuri got knocked out was much more competitive than I remembered it being.
He gets knocked out because he's crashing in after nailing Pereira with a big right hand.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think that's my only real thing that I feel has changed, is that I feel the margins are slightly closer than I thought they were. Even despite the fact that, Pereira won a second round KO. I think that it was actually quite a competitive fight, but again, it's one where I can't really find it in me to pick Yuri, because for me to pick Yuri is simply would be one of those picks where it's not. It would be kind of I'm expecting this outcome to happen at some point if these guys fight each other, kind of thing.
Yeah,
which is to some extent like a kind of gambler's fallacy, right? Is that you've seen a coin be flipped and land on heads twice in a row, or whatever. And then eventually it's going to come up tails because these guys are close enough, well enough matched that, like, at some point you do expect that Yuri will win if they just keep fighting because Pereira can simply not insulate himself from him. Or if he can, he hasn't. Like, his way, as we said, his way of insulating would be to, like, go after him. But he's not doing that. But, yeah, that would be the only reason that I can find it in me to pick Yuri, is that just that he's probably going to win at some point if they keep fighting.
Yeah.
But it's just the fact that it's the attrition. It's the attrition and it's the technique. It's that when they get into these wild exchanges, you know, like that final sequence, I know that Pereira is going to be throwing with equal or more power, and he's going to be throwing a lot tighter.
Yep.
And I know that Yuri's legs are going to be getting absolutely shredded the deeper into the fight it goes.
Yep.
And yeah, so I still, as you said, like you kind of have to pick it for the same reasons that we picked it the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, and the only thing is that we picked it right the first time, but it played out in that coin flippy kind of way.
Mm-hmm.
Could have gone the other way very
easily. We didn't say what we would want from Yuri, and I would have to say, I think body kicks. I think he did a decent job of kind of setting up his entry. He was sort of gesturing towards the idea of setting up his entries with his own body jab, making sure that he'd be able to go for takedowns, or at least keep the idea of takedowns and level changes in Pereira's mind. But I think, he was low kicking a bit with Pereira, but I think his body kicks was some of his most successful work. Like if he can find a way to just consistently teep and push Pereira back, so he's got a ranged weapon that isn't requiring him to leap into left hook.
Yeah, and a teep can be a really good
counter range.
A teep can be a really good way of dealing with the low kicks. Because I mean, if I had to say something, I'd like to see him improve. How about check one low kick would be nice, but that's not going to happen.
We've got to be realistic. He wants to learn cool stuff. I feel like someone could convince him that teeps are cool.
Yeah,
I don't think anyone can convince him that checking low kicks are cool.
No
one's going to be like, look at this video of this samurai warrior checking a low kick.
Yeah. Like moving your head and countering with a punch, that is pretty cool. And so he will occasionally do that. Pull counter, slip counter.
It looks badass.
It's dope. You you make the guy swing and miss. Checking a kick is just nothing happened.
Yeah.
Except both of our legs got kind of hurt. It sucks. But since that's obviously not going to happen, a teep can also be a good way of countering the low kicks. You teep with your lead leg, you literally just take it out of the way of the kick. You lift your knee and stab your foot into the guy's gut while he's trying to kick that leg.
Huh?
So, sure, as an avenue to getting some body work in and trying to get some attrition of his own, which is an equation he's just really on the wrong side of, as we saw in their first fight, that would probably be good. It's the same fight. It's the same fight, and it was a fun fight. I can't complain too much about that, but there's just not much more to say.
Yeah, I mean, also, just the fact that the UFC and MMA in general needs to appreciate these guys, and, in some ways, Pereira specifically. Again, this isn't, a free win for him. It's very... Mm-hmm. It's very perilous, and... yeah, he's once again willing to step in. The last time these guys fought, it was because Jones Stipe fell through, right?
Was that? Oh, God. That fight was actually made? I don't even remember that.
Something like that, wasn't it?
I believe you. I just don't remember it.
It was some big event fell through, and these guys stepped in to save it, basically.
Yes. Wikipedia confirms it was supposed to be... UFC 295 was supposed to be Jones Miocic.
Mm. And yeah, so these guys stepped in and were like, yeah, we'll do it. We're great action fighters. And yeah, once again, Pereira's doing it. He's now defending the belt. He's got, legacy on the line and all that other kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm massive credit to him for, once again, being the guy to save the day when no one else wanted to.
In fact, though...
credit to Yuri for just...
It was already on the card that time. This is a whole new level of stepping up. They were supposed to be the co-main event.
Yeah.
This time around, they were not booked. So I mean, they should be getting, and I know they're not as much as they deserve, but they should be getting massively compensated for straight up saving this card, because without them, this is not a pay-per-view.
Yep.
You know, without them, it would be a pretty damn good fight night card, but it's not a pay-per-view.
Yep.
So yeah, I hope for the best outcome for both guys, which is to say Alex Pereira gets to keep the belt and Garry-Prochazka gets to ascend to Warriors Heaven. Which is really all he wants. Okay, let's call it there and take a break. When we come back, the co-main event of UFC 303, Brian Ortega, Diego Lopes, and Ian Machado, Garry-Page. And maybe we'll get in a little, at least comment on the very quick fight between Whitaker and Aliskerov. If not, all that stuff will be on a bonus episode. Anyway, all of that, less of that, something after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands, the co-main event of UFC 303, Brian Ortega versus Diego Lopes. And, I was kind of scratching my head over this one. I'm still not quite sure, Phil, how to feel about Brian Ortega. He had a very troubling injury, a shoulder injury, no less, in his first fight with Yair Rodriguez. That was now all the way back in 2022. A little less than 2 full years later, he returned to rematch Rodriguez, another fight in which he got injured. I don't remember the nature.
That was him jumping up and down.
Oh, God, that's right.
He rolled his ankle before the fight. That's what you're remembering, right? You're just remembering him getting injured, but you're like, how did it happen? Was it a low kick? No. It was him rolling his ankle getting ready to fight.
How could I forget that? Yeah, I was just wanted to fight, like, where does the injury happen? I don't remember. I forgot. He literally, broke his leg in the warm-up.
Yep.
But a very impressive performance, no less. A very dogged, determined performance where it really did seem like he learned from the difficulty he was having with Rodriguez in their first fight, even before the injury. That was a fight he was not really doing very well in. Very heavy pressure, much more focus on the actual wrestling part of his game than I think we're used to seeing, which, like, a Brian Ortega who wrestles is just a much, much better, more dangerous fighter than one who doesn't, for the obvious reason that he is a menace on the ground. And, but yeah, that's like 2 fights over the span of, 3 years with 2 injuries in there of different kinds. It feels like, as I think you alluded to before we started here, that Ortega is in, like, Anthony Pettis territory, where he's still incredibly tough, virtually impossible to actually knock out, but his body is falling apart, and he is aging, and he has been in a shitload of crazy back-and-forth fights. And so here he is against Diego Lopes, who in many ways compares to Ortega, but I think is much more, perhaps closer to the guy Ortega was at the very start of his career, much more a straight-up brawler. A guy who just trusts that he's going to beat people by just doing everything at all times, constantly attacking, crazy scrambles on the ground, submission attempt after submission attempt, and winging huge, admittedly quite powerful punches on the feet with very bad form. Just all go at all times. And I don't know. I mean, what do you think? What do you think of this matchup? Is Brian Ortega too broken down to hold back a much more reckless fighter than himself?
Barring him having just his arms and legs falling off or whatever.
Yeah.
Which, as you said, it's totally possible. No, I can't see it. I've got to be honest. This seems like a nightmare match for Diego Lopes.
Yeah.
Because as you said, he's like young Brian Ortega, with the exception being obviously that he's not like actually very young. Like Brian Ortega, when he was doing this stuff, was mid-20s, and then had a long time to round out his MMA career. Diego Lopes is like almost 30 years old and like 12 years into his MMA career.
Yeah, this is who he is.
Yeah. And yeah, credit to Brian Ortega. He has like genuinely developed, and we've said it like multiple times. There's been several distinct periods at which Brian Ortega has shown evolution. Firstly, from changing from just being like a wild submission guy to being crazy comeback and knockout puncher, to being an actually fairly coherent, if slightly plodding and rote, like outside striker with like a genuine like capacity for like jabs and body work and so on, and then to being able to put it all together into an actual strategic package against Yair Rodriguez, where, as you said, like he adjusted to the things which went wrong in the first fight, knew what he had to do, and executed it. He had a very heavy, he's been someone who has demonstrated both like a back foot counter-striking performance against the Korean Zombie and a front foot pressure performance against Yair Rodriguez, because he knew that would be necessary against both fighters, and he pulled it off very well.
It's true.
Yeah, I have to give a lot of credit to being able to do that, because again, as we've said so many times, many people simply just won't. They won't adjust their game plans for the fighters in front of them. And yeah, so he's someone who's improved from both a strategic and a technical level. And Lopez's main thing is being too gritty and too tough to die, and being super dynamic on the ground and on the feet, so that, people will beat him up, and then they'll find that he's still there, and he'll come back with something crazy. Or, in the case of, like, Sadiq Yusuf or whatever, he'll just blow them up, blow their doors off, like, pretty early.
Yeah.
And that's just not going to happen to Brian Ortega. Again, like, with the obvious caveat that he might suddenly get old overnight, or the bits of him, bits of him fell off in the run-up to his fight last time, so his head could just roll off his shoulders, as Buffer calls them.
Yeah,
like,
he nods a little too enthusiastically as Buffer points to him, and it just rolls into the filthy chewing gum bedecked floor outside the octagon.
Yep.
Could happen.
That aside, is Diego Lopes going to catch Brian Ortega sleeping in a scramble and submit him?
Yeah.
Conversely, is he going to, get him into a clinch exchange and deck him as he did the, notoriously... Well, not notoriously, but somewhat fragile Sadiq Yusuf?
He's fragile, for sure. He's been hurt early a lot.
Yeah. I mean, but this is Brian Ortega. This is one of the most durable fighters we've ever seen.
True. Very true.
So, for me, it just has to be this guy has learned and developed from the base that the other guy is at. He has the exact kind of physical and technical traits that should insulate him from all the stuff that Diego Lopes does.
Yeah.
He shouldn't be submittable. He shouldn't be knockoutable. Like, what's Diego Lopes going to do? Is he going to win rounds? Doesn't really do that.
Doesn't
is he
really
do it. Brian Ortega? Because that doesn't really tend to happen very much either.
No.
People who beat Brian Ortega tend to be just like masterful technicians.
Yeah, they tend to be
just beat him up and cannot get pushed out of the fight.
Yeah, with the exception of Gary Rodriguez, who of course beat him with the injury. Although even in that fight, they tend to be fighters who can control Brian Ortega. You have to be able to really consistently dictate the fight, the direction, the pace, and the positioning. And yeah, I mean, I'll say it, Phil. I can hear you talking around the edges of this. I know we're both thinking of Nasrat Haqparast's fight last weekend and how he boasted that he had reached a new level in his training at TriStar. I'll say it. Rener Gracie is a better coach than Firas Zahabi. I know you didn't want to go there, but it has to be said. Brian Ortega has proven more adaptable and better prepared than anyone Firas Zahabi has trained since Rory McDonald. Those are the facts.
Yep. You ain't lying.
But really, I mean, looking at what Ortega did in his last fight, I think that would be very much the correct game plan to do against Diego Lopes. Because
I honestly feel like and I'm gonna regret this and eat these words so badly.
Yeah.
I feel like it doesn't matter what approach Brian Ortega uses.
You have a very low opinion of Diego Lopes, or you just think they're too similar and one is the OG.
Yeah, they're too similar, and one of them has simply he's just simply learned to be much better, and he's never shown any of the flaws that would come with being the older fighter, such as getting chinny or losing his ability to assert himself. In fact, his last fight was literally the most assertive fight he's ever had.
It really was, yeah.
So yeah, I just feel like Brian Ortega is simply a better version of Diego Lopes.
To be honest, if we get a couple,
fully recognizing that this is gonna backfire on me hideously.
Yeah, naturally.
That's just how the sport works.
If we get a couple years of an increasingly injury-prone Brian Ortega being forced because of that to embrace his inner Pat Healy, to do the kind of shit that, speaking of Nasrat Haqparast, that his version of what Jared Gordon did last weekend, just stay in people's faces, make them uncomfortable, and actively wrestle them. I think we could see several Brian Ortega wins in the last years of his career. I think it's a very workable approach for him. I would personally like to see that. I think there is, in fact, a possibility of him getting hurt, getting overwhelmed by Lopes, who just doesn't give a shit on the feet. He is just, he's as reckless as Korean Zombie might have been 4 or 5 years before the one that fought Brian Ortega. And maybe that would have worked
Brian
better.
Ortega himself against what's his face, Moicano.
Yeah,
he was just getting smoked for 2 rounds.
Yeah,
and then just went absolutely berserk.
Yeah, that used to be his calling card. I would personally really prefer to see Ortega pressure and work into clinches and hit takedowns. Diego Lopes does not have good takedown defense. He doesn't even seem to think about defending takedowns, really. Because, I mean, I think of his fight with Gavin Tucker. He did start to defend the takedown, and he was like, no, there's a submission here. And, against a lot of his opponents, he's usually right. There is a submission there. And it pays off that he goes for it. It's very hard to see that working against Ortega, and it's very hard to see Lopes not fighting as he always does. And given that, I think you pressure him, you go for takedowns, you're going to get him. And one thing that I really liked seeing from Ortega against Rodriguez was that he mauled him from top position. Like, he crushed him with the ground and pound. That's what Movsar Evloev did. That's the guy who's beaten Diego Lopes in the UFC. I don't think Ortega's as good a wrestler as Evloev, but I don't think you have to be against Lopes. He's just going to give you the position. So I would like to see pressuring behind the jab, punching into clinches or shots, and holding top position. I think that would be a very safe way and a pretty reliable way, given Ortega's just all-around skill on the ground, to beat Lopes here.
Yeah, you're probably right, to be honest, because I think one of the things that Ortega has to do for himself, I think, is try and make sure he's not actually in too many more insane wars.
Yeah, that will be good.
Because that is what this fight will be if he doesn't do that.
Right.
Because even though I think if he fights a back foot fight against Diego Lopes for 3 rounds, he will beat him, and he will probably beat him quite convincingly. There will still be moments at which Diego Lopes will punch him as hard as he possibly can.
Absolutely.
Well, the many things that Brian Ortega has improved, being a defensive mastermind is not really one of them.
No, his defense is still pretty much entirely his distance. And a much better way of controlling that, if you're like slow-footed, as Ortega is to be aggressive.
Yeah. As I said, I just don't think this can be a boring fight, because I just don't think that's what these guys are.
No, absolutely.
Even if Ortega goes for the most maximalist, top control, wrestling focused game plan he can, I think Diego Lopes is just too scrambly to make that happen. Too scrambly to make that consistently happen until he might start getting tired or whatever.
Yeah, not even just purely scrambly, too aggressive. I mean, he is going to be trying to hit submissions from his back. He is going to be attacking things, and there's going to be a lot of stuff for Ortega to have to diligently defend, but at the same time, there will be a lot of openings for him to do damage and improve his position against all of those attacks. So I agree. I think on the ground, I mean, it's Brian Ortega. How many boring Brian Ortega fights are there on the ground? And likewise for Diego Lopes. That fight with Movsar Evloev, that was Evloev being diligent and disciplined and holding position. That fight was a banger because Lopes just wouldn't let him sit there without having to deal with shit from top position constantly. I'm curious about the stats, actually, just to put a point on it. Let me look it up. Movsar Evloev stats. How many submission attempts were there in that fight? I'm willing to guess at least 10, and I think it might be more.
Yep.
Where are my submission attempt stats? Submission attempt. Oh, they gave him 4? There's no way there's only 4 submission attempts in that fight. That must be some weird way in how they qualify them. It has to be somewhat locked in or something. There are way more than 4 submission attempts in that fight. There's 4 arm bars alone that Evloev has to defend, the way I remember it. Anyway, no, I think it'll be very exciting. I fully agree. I think it's a fantastic co-main event. And like I said, on top of this card, without Pereira-Prochazka stepping in, Ortega-Lopes will be a fantastic fight night main event. Yep. It is that good of an action fight with a really prominent fighter in Brian Ortega and a streaking, I don't know if he's actually an up-and-comer, but, somebody with some serious momentum in Diego Lopes.
Yeah, and he's definitely someone who's just going to be an action fighter staple for the foreseeable future.
Should be for the remainder of his career an action fighter staple, right?
Yeah, I'm never going to be unhappy to see Diego Lopes in booked for a card.
Absolutely.
If he doesn't win this, as we probably suspect he won't, you can do him against Jair Rodriguez. It'd be cool.
Sure. Yeah. But, yep, I suppose, as you said before, pick the OG in a sort of mirror match like this. You go the Jędrzejczyk Kowalkiewicz route, and it usually ends up being correct.
Yep, particularly when the OG has shown some clear development.
Yeah.
And isn't actually looking old, apart from in really weird ways.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that should do it for that. Let's take one more break. When we come back, Ian Garry, Michael Page. After this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back. Let's talk about the main card opener here. UFC 303. We've got Ian Machado Garry versus Michael Venom Page. They did not do the route I... Ooh, that bothered me. I said route just before we ended this last segment, and now I've just said route. That's gonna bug me. They did not go the track I expected with Michael Venom Page. I thought they're going to give him Kevin Holland, reasonable but very winnable fight. He absolutely aced that test. Then they're going to give him Stephen Thompson, who is basically like clinging to relevance despite very clearly being super old and fading. And then they're going to give him a fraudulent title shot.
Yep.
They didn't do it, but this is kind of close, you know? MVP wins this fight. That's a very prominent win. I don't think it's impossible that he wins it either, is the troubling thing. As incredibly impressive as Ian Garry was throughout his first 3, 4 UFC fights, 5, I do think we have seen him, I suppose you could say, ostracize himself into a bit of an unhelpful pattern in his last couple fights. Is it odd that we have a guy who is actually technical, who then appears to be going through the process of becoming capital T technical? Because that's what it feels like is happening. It's Adesanya. It's Adesanya all over again is how I feel about Ian Garry right now.
I don't necessarily feel that's the case. I feel like... And that's why I think this fight is perhaps more interesting than it has like the potential to be. Because obviously the main thing is that like you'd look at Gary's last fight and you'd look at most MVP fights and you'd be like, man, this has the potential to be the same kind of stinker that Wonder Boy MVP would have been. Because, I mean, that's the one thing. We all know that Wonder Boy MVP probably would have been absolutely horrific. Oh. And credit to them. I believe both Wonder Boy and MVP were just like, yeah, I think that would be boring. Like, when they were asked about it, in one way or another, they were like, yeah, I think that would be two guys staring at each other and not much happening.
Fair enough, you know?
Yeah. Obviously phrased it a little more positively than I might have, but like in both, I mean, I think that's both a like reflection of what they like to happen. You know, they like to have someone coming after them so that they can counter-strike.
Yeah.
As well as like some actual like quite charming self-reflection. It's 6 of one, half dozen of the other kind of thing. But with Garry, I think one of the things that we've sort of lauded him for is his ability to be protean and his ability to change up and have different game plans and have very specific approaches for his opponents, right? Which made him such a good matchup, a good choice for like being for a like IQ test like Neil Magny, for example, because the elements for how you beat him were set out, and then Gary executed them very well. I think what we saw in the fight with Jeff Neal was simply that like there's a limit to how Proty and Gary can be, because in that fight he was like, oh yeah, I've seen that you can just sort of, Neal is a one-handed fighter. You can just circle away from him, draw him onto shots. You don't need to get into like a big, ugly Shavkat-esque war with him. He is also a solvable off the back foot. And we just kind of saw that Gary isn't actually like a particularly good or comfortable back foot fighter.
Was he not better off the back foot against, say, I mean, I know, the opponents are different, but was he not better off the back foot against Gabe Green? Back in 2022, a very aggressive fighter? With two hands?
I guess. With two hands, but also small and slow.
Yes.
Whereas Jeff Neal is large and potent.
Yeah.
And
that's definitely part of it.
Throws straight. I think some of Gary's very impressive performances have been due to the fact that he's insulated by being both big and quick.
Yes.
And and his opponents have been one or the other. They've either been big like Rodriguez but incredibly slow, or they've been small and slow.
Yeah.
They've been big and slow, but Neal isn't particularly is actually quite quick and reasonably big, and you saw that Gary did not like having to counterpunch against him at all. But I don't think that Ian Gary would be well served to counterpunch Michael Venom Page, partially because MVP will wait forever.
Yep.
And I mean, again, that would just simply be a case of giving the extreme, giving someone the fight that they are absolutely used to. So, I mean, I think he should actually be using some version of the Neil Magny game plan. He should be pressuring, he should be working into the clinch where he can, even though, that wasn't necessarily the thing he should have been doing against Neil Magny, but he should be pressuring and low kicking and coming forward. Now, I think that should be. This is the way this is an interesting fight, because it is the fight where what he wants to do naturally is also what he kind of should be doing in this one.
You think that's what he wants to do naturally, is to be the pressure fighter?
To some extent, yeah. I think he wants people to be reacting to his stuff, yes.
Yeah.
He wants to be. I think he wants to be on the back foot, as we saw against Neal.
Yeah, that's true. He does look at his most comfortable, like Sankinan, Daniel Rodriguez, Neil Magny, where he just has somebody biting on his feints and reacting to his level change threats and so on and so forth. I just before we move on to talking about this particular fight, I do want to push back slightly and say I don't think you can attribute everything Ian Gary did against Jeff Neal to the fact that Jeff Neal is simply faster than a guy like Gabriel Green. I think he actually just made worse technical decisions. Maybe that was his thought process. I can't take my small steps and stay there and be ready to punish him with the jab, and that's how I'm going to reposition myself because he's going to catch me, he's so fast. Maybe that is what he thought, but I don't think that's actually materially true, that it was necessary for Gary to fight like he did against Neal. I think he could have fought much more like he did against Gabe Green, which was, as I said, a lot of adjustment steps in that fight, careful management of position, even as he spent much of it with his back near the fence. just like keeping his stance, moving in small little subtle ways so that you don't sacrifice the threat that is the thing that actually keeps the guy from overwhelming you. And against Jeff Neal, he was doing like the fucking Alexander Gustafsson thing. Like turning fully away and running out of the pocket. Where did that emerge? That's not something I thought he was capable of doing before that fight. And I certainly assumed, seeing it at the time, that it maybe had something to do with the fact that he was apparently too annoying for all the evil people at Team Evil. He was simply too obnoxious to be tolerated by a collection of the most heinous people on the planet. And so he, as I'm pretty sure, that Jeff Neal fight was his first. I'm not even sure where he started training there, but it was not with Henry Hooft. So I don't know. To me, it felt like an unwelcome sea change in the game of Ian Garry. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe it was an overcorrection on his part, and he's still capable of doing what he did the last time he fought an aggressive fighter. But I didn't like it. I thought it was a very, very bad look and a potentially catastrophic misunderstanding of like what the actual goals and aims are in fighting a guy like Jeff Neal. Like, it was very close to being one of those fights where Garry is the guy who thinks he's being smart and as a result lets his opponent hang around until he manages to finish him. Like, it was just shy of a Volkov, Derek Lewis type of performance where you can't point to him being like reckless or crazy, but you're like, maybe a little more aggression would have kept you safe there. I don't know. I didn't like it, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Very passive. Very passive.
Yeah, that being said,
yes.
I mean, it's still a tricky fight to call, right? Because...
Very tricky.
I mean... Michael Page is still such an enigma because he's had so many, like, utterly dreadful fights which could have gone either way. He's either won or lost. And some of them have simply been against, like, genuinely quite decent opposition.
Yeah.
I mean, so... You know, if you're like, MVP is obviously someone that can simply be beaten. You know, he's got this huge wide stance. He's getting old and more fragile. He can simply be beaten with like a good low kicking game. Then why was like Douglas Lima why did Douglas Lima have such a dreadful fight against him the second time?
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm not sure that Douglas Lima actually lost that fight, but, I mean, no one won it. Especially not the fans.
No, Douglas Lima, yeah.
I mean, an absolutely dreadful win over Paul Daly, where he got, like, taken down and controlled multiple times. But, like...
the funniest outcome.
Partially because he's, like, fought so many cans. But also, you know, in his actual fights against decent people... He's rarely been blown out of the water, with the exception of that first Douglas Lima fight where he just got KO'd instantly,
low kicked and dropped into an uppercut.
Yeah. That was one of the earliest things I can remember where someone's like edited Marvel heroes into the into the finishing clip. Someone did him like Douglas Lima catching Mjolnir as it flies through the air and then bonking Page on the head with it or whatever.
Right.
I'm so glad that AI has made this now available to everyone.
Yes. It's great.
Yeah. But yeah, so this is the thing, is that he's had very few fights against elite competition, and they've mostly been either horrific suckfests where no one wins,
yep,
or he's just gotten, like, knocked out.
Once.
Instantly.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's it. I mean, it's a sample size of 3.
Yeah, it's true.
He's fought like 3 good people.
That's true.
Paul Daly, Douglas Lima twice. And I guess Kevin Holland?
Yeah. Asterisk. Another good fighter, but asterisk for sure.
And Kevin Holland is definitely the best person that he's convincingly beaten. And by a mile.
Yes. Yes. Convincingly, yes. So, Suckfest is kind of what I'm anticipating. I gotta be honest. You know, like, it should be... It's gonna be frustrating for Ian Garry. For sure. He's gonna have the low kicks. I mean, we know that. And those were very effective, at least... in the first fight. But they were still effective when Douglas Lima remembered to throw them in the rematch. But they were very effective.
That's the other thing. But like Douglas Lima is one of the most glacially slow-paced fighters.
Yeah, just incredibly inconsistent as a result.
Yeah.
So there will be the low kicks. What else is Ian Garry going to be comfortable doing? Or are the low kicks just going to win? And does that not sound like a terrible fight to watch?
I mean, that's just MVP, right? He's going to do his best to make every fight a terrible fight to watch.
I mean, yeah. He low-kicked Neil Magny. That wasn't a great fight to watch, but it was still a very professional performance where he was building to a finish at the end. MVP is not going to respond to the low kicks the way Neil Magny did, by just, like, cowering against the fence. He's going to keep moving around and being annoying and pulling faces. And trying to land one counter every 2 minutes. I just think bad fight is quite likely.
Yeah. I mean, I find it, honestly, I just find it a genuinely tricky one to call. In terms of like who's going to win, as well as like what it's going to look like. As I said, like MVP's ability to pull people into dreadful fights is extremely high, but he's only done it against the most trickable man in the world in Kevin Holland, and the slowest paced welterweight outside of Tyron Woodley, and maybe not actually like much slower paced than Tyron Woodley.
Yeah, immediately after that fight, Kevin Holland chased a dollar bill on a string into traffic. He's very trickable.
And yeah, I mean, there's still a solid chance that like Michael Pereira-Page didn't even win that Douglas Lima fight. I don't even know. It was horrific.
I'm picking Ian Garry. He's got it. It's like a shitty version of the main event. I'm picking Ian Garry because he's got the attrition. I think that's reason enough to pick him. He's going to be battering the legs. I just don't think it's going to be good.
Yeah.
I just think the pace is going to be dreadfully slow.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I got to do that as well. I just got to pick the younger fighter. Again, I've got to pick that he's going to not be stupid. Again, I'm still slightly concerned that Garry isn't going to be able to deal. That might just be a big part of the Neil fight, is that everyone he's fought has also been glacially slow in one way or another.
True, yeah.
And that he's just not able to deal with like someone who's just on speed parity, and that without that he just kept like running away. And yeah, that he might just fall apart. But that's the thing. Even if he falls apart, like the fight just might be a suck fest where he can win because at some point he'll just fall over onto MVP, and then MVP will never get up again.
That would be
because he's genuinely dreadful off his back.
Yeah, that would be a good way for it to go.
Yeah. So I guess I got to pick Garry too.
He might do it too. He might turn into wrestler Ian Garry for this fight.
He probably should. Like, if he can.
Sure.
Is he a better takedown artist than Kevin Holland? I don't know.
Probably not worse. I mean, we've literally never seen it, but he's probably not worse.
Actually, you know what? I'm genuinely fascinated by this one. Because I just don't have a mental image of how this fight's going to look. Apart from, as you said, probably bad.
Probably bad. But maybe in a compelling way, or at least a funny way. Yeah, it's not just the speed thing that Neil had. MVP also has like timing. He will actually like trick you with his rhythm, and he will hit you with feints. These are things that Jeff Neal is not really capable of doing. Jeff Neal's kind of a one-speed fighter. That speed is impressive, but you do get used to it. MVP will continue confounding you late into the fight, at least like one shot at a time. I don't know. It's a weird one.
Yeah. I feel like MVP is definitely one of those fights where I have to sort of recognize that maybe he was just a bit better than I thought he was.
Oh, yeah. There's just a place for these guys in MMA, man. There's just a place for the Stephen Thompsons and the MVPs. Like, if he had been better tested and better booked throughout his career, we may very well be talking about several impressive wins of MVP. It's just that he fought a bunch of bums forever.
Yep. No one to blame but himself.
True. Yeah. So, anyway, he's here now. Maybe now he's warmed up. he's spent he's finally done with the, like, I mean, how long has this guy been doing karate? He's done with the 23-year warm-up period, and now he's ready to start fighting for, like, fighting good opponents. Maybe he's capable.
Yep. Yeah, maybe we're looking at, like, the equivalent. Maybe he's like karate Robbie Lawler. He's finally coming into his own.
That's right.
He's just been saving it all up for this one great surge.
Yep.
Get the belt and make Luca Bourdon's head literally explode.
Yeah. MVP, if it gets announced that MVP gets a title shot, even not even seeing the fight, Luca Bourdon will wake up the next day and his hair will have gone completely white. Be like,
it's more the fact that like Leon Edwards or whatever could do his classic falling asleep at the wheel thing.
Oh my!
For like one, and then just get mean.
Oh
KO'd.
My God! Can you imagine?
Yeah,
Luca would experience that like the priest in Exorcist 3 battled the demon and came back with his hair all white and aged 20 years. My God. Oh, Ian Garry, please just take one for the team. You know, you could make up for so much obnoxious behavior. Just take one for the team, lose to MVP, so that I can see Michael Page very possibly one-shot KO Leon Edwards. I need to see it. All right, let's call things there. Again, we have quite a few other fights to discuss, however briefly. From the Whitaker versus Aliskerov card, you will find all of that over on the Heavy Hands Patreon. That is patreon.com/heavyhands. And I mean it. Like, there's quite a lot of interesting stuff on here. Maybe would not have been satisfying without the triumphant main event finish, but we're talking, Volkov Pavlovich, we learned something. Kelvin Gastelum, Nasser Haqparast, and Johnny Walker are all the same guys they've always been, and we found that out. Unnecessarily, but in a variety of hilarious ways. We had a guy taking a fight on 3 days' notice up a weight class, beating a, fringe contender, or at least strong prospect. That was a big deal. Rinat Fakhretdinov and Nicholas Dalby had a banger of a fight that was disgusting to watch, but in a very compelling way. There was just a lot of good stuff on this card. So head over to patreon.com/heavyhands. We will be discussing some of that. And please check out my Substack, facepunching.substack.com. Had a few issues in the middle of this month that slowed down my schedule, but as a result, I came into this week with a bunch of nearly finished articles, which will pretty much all be coming out this week. So, as I said, I already published my
detailed breakdown of Gervonta Davis versus Frank Martin. And the thrust for that article is really the importance of strategy. That's how I think Gervonta Davis won that fight, aside from just, being a little better than Frank Martin. I thought he had an excellent, simple, effective game plan that carried him to victory. I've also got my now long-delayed Makhachev-Poirier breakdown coming out this week, and a couple other things on the cusp as well. So I appreciate your support and your patience. facepunching.substack.com for my written breakdowns. And find us on Twitter at Evo Greg Jackson. That's Phil. At Boxing Bush, that's me. And until next week, when we will be discussing all the crazy results of UFC 303, not least of which Michael Page's knockout win of Ian Garry. Until then, hope you enjoyed the show. And if you came here today for the finer points of Face Punch and you came to the right place, this has been Heavy Hands.